Frazer,
Hi,
welcome.
Luke. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on, mate. It's nice to see you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
For our listeners, then, if you tell us who's Frazer, what is it that you do?
I'm Frazer, and I'm now I class myself as a managing director, but I'm a coffee roaster. So I roast coffee for wholesale. So we supply that to cafes, coffee shops, restaurants, offices, and a variety of other style of businesses throughout Sheffield and South Yorkshire. I have an e-commerce brand as well, so we supply our same coffee through our website, and that goes all over the country now. So that's the whole country we supply that to on subscription, single order usage as well. We also as well have our own retail premises. So I've got one at Runnel Street. We've just had a new open as well up in Ecclesfield. So yeah, that's what I do.
It's a drive-through as well. Then
it's a drive-through as well. Yeah, the very first of its kind. As all the research I've done, it appears to be the first one in South Yorkshire. Maybe Yorkshire was what we initially thought, but it seems that there's one company, like a small little horse box in Bradford. But we're the first building, proper lines and intercom system and everything. So
it's amazing, mate.
Yeah.
So good. So let's look at how it started. How did you get into coffee? What were you doing before? Tell us the story right from the start.
Yeah, so my background is I finished school, didn't do very well, but I always got told, get a trade, can fall into a trade no matter what happens. So qualified as a plumber. Then
Was that advice from your parents?
Parents and then people around me. I've always been quite handy. Even when I was young, I always helped out with my father and my grandpa, and just trade was just a natural progression for me. I just felt it was a better fit for me, and I enjoyed it. I've always enjoyed playing with tools and whatnot. So yeah, trained as a plumber. Felt at the time I never no specific home in it. Just there's a shortage of plumbers. Go and train to be a plumber. So I did. Loved it, really enjoyed it, and then started working on an apprenticeship scheme, went through the ranks, kind of got fully qualified, and then I retrained again to be a gas engineer, and then started looking for work in that industry. I did for a brief time, but sadly once I got to a point where I was qualified, I had a cycling and I had a bad car accident. I got run over, and just my health kind of got knocked for a little bit of time, so I decided to stop going for full-time work, go on part-time, trying to reduce my hours a little bit, just so I could kind of focus on my health for a time, because I had a good knock to the head and a few other things. And during that time, I just decided to work in a coffee shop. Previous to this, never worked in hospitality, but I come from a family of pub owners. So my grandma and grandpa used to run pubs in Sheffield, and I've always been around food and drink. And from a very young age, we've always had coffee in the house. I lived on the manor for a brief time, so the neighbours down there were from Eritrea, which is a very cultural, significant coffee country. So it was always part of my life. Never did I anticipate it'd be a career move. But when I did this lifestyle change, went to work in a coffee shop for a brief time, and I fell in love with it. It was great. I was like, I like working with people, no stranger to service, and like
it brought a social aspect, I suppose, that plumbing doesn't necessarily have.
I love playing. I love having a play on the with the lads on site and stuff, and like doing manual work and fixing things. Definitely love that side of it. But I just felt a spark with getting into hospitality. I think because it's never been until recently, I would say, it wasn't necessarily seen as a career choice back then. You just did it as a part-time job from going from college to uni, and then kind of look at further progression. But I just really got a taste for it. And I thought, well, at the time I was trying to reduce my hours and circumstances. But I realised actually maybe this is what I want to do. So that's kind of where the taste for that industry wanted to go. And during this entire time, by the way, I was also roasting coffee in my own home. I've got a little machine that I'd bought to roast like 100 grams at a time.
Is that having gone in to work at the coffee shop, you thought, I want to do this myself, or were you doing it previously?
I was roasting coffee previous to this. So
as a plumber?
Yeah, just in my own time.
For you to sell?
Just for myself. It's almost like I want to have like a little hobby sewing. For me, roasting coffee was just always just a little hobby at home. It's not a big hobby in the UK, but it's very big in America.
I was going to say it's quite a unique hobby.
Yeah. And it was really hard to get hold of like good stuff as well. So if I wanted to buy coffee online, I had to go to like a really prestigious London roastery. And I could never find anything locally. I could never go to a shop locally. I think Pollard's at the time was the only thing in Sheffield really that existed that was coffee roasting. And not to knock them, but they're old school coffee. I was looking for new school coffee, and it just didn't really exist. So
for me and for the listeners, what's the difference between old school coffee and
So old school is commodity based coffee. So that's like low grade par. It comes from a country like Colombia, and it's very general in terms of where it comes from, the area or location, the genetics, what altitude it was grown at, and that information is very vague. It'll just say Colombia, and that we'll get into it, but when you go to these places and you understand coffee in a deeper way, you realise that they're vague for a reason. Because they don't want to tell you all the ins and outs of it.
Got you.
And the vagueness comes because the quality is low.
Okay. So you recognised that early, that you
very much
you want
so.
A better standard. How old were you at this time?
21. 21, yeah. So 20. So this is when I'd kind of started doing a bit of part-time work in the coffee shop, and at that point I was trying to buy green coffee online from different places, different genetic types. It wasn't easy to find, but there were roasteries around the country that were selling green coffee on their websites, and I was just buying it for myself to just do myself. That was it. No intention of making it into anything. Never gave it to family or friends. Occasionally someone came around and went, "Ooh, I've heard you like coffee, Frazer. Can you make me one?" I weren't going to make a business out of it. I had no idea what I was doing.
At that time then, so I can relate because I've doodled all my life. Like you said, I never thought I could ever monetize it.
Yeah, never.
But I was passionate about art. So at that moment in time, were you passionate about coffee?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm looking for really high grade. I was looking for provenance, so like where it comes from, if they got a detail of like the actual altitude or the farm location on a geo map. So I was really into it because I know that terroir, or we use that word in like wine, or the soil plays a massive part into the end flavour. So I was trying to find that information so when I could roast, I could compare, make little notes, what I enjoyed of it. That was a real cool hobby thing. I really enjoyed it, and I'm always been a bit of a foodie. I'm not just coffee. I like beer. I like wine. I like pizza and barbecue, and so I do take it really seriously, and I really enjoy it. But that's by nature. I like that's how I like to do things. But there was never an intention to turn it into a business. It was just a something I did in my own personal time, and I'd made a little station on my kitchen counter, and then once a week I'd do like an hour's worth of roasting and do a couple of different genetic types, and then when I brewed I would just enjoy what I'd tried and made, and I'd try different stuff, and it was just interesting, and that was it. That was nothing else to it. And it wasn't until I got a taste of the working in hospitality, where the shop that I'd worked for was trying to do almost like a franchise model, but with a artisanal twist, that I realised that the big chain coffee shops were going to struggle to kind of keep up with it, because that's so engaging, feels really personal. It's something that the chains can't offer. And I was like, well, this is lovely, because this feels like a nice restaurant, but in a coffee environment. And they'd gone out of the way to get good coffee. They'd dealt with a roastery, I think it was in Peterborough, they'd gone to get their coffee from. And they'd done all the things right that you would associate with how things are now today. And I was like, well, this is brilliant. This is literally what I try and do at home, but they've done it in a commercial environment. I had no understanding of like environmental health or how to run a business plan or any of these fun things you have to do now, like, when you run a business. But just the concept was brilliant, and I love working in it. And I was like, well, imagine if I could create my own coffee brand. I could potentially sell my coffee to this company. And it was an idea, but it never really did much to it. And then I really started to take it quite seriously, and I thought, my health's not really getting better. I had like I said, a really bad knock on my head, so I was struggling with dissociation and aura migraines and a load of things. So I struggled to find work that would allow me to kind of be flexible with that. So I thought, if I get a role that allows me to fit around my health, then that's going to allow me to still continue working, but also do something that I enjoy. And coffee seemed like a natural progression from there, because I was like, well, I understand it, I know what to do with it, I just need to figure out how I take it from here to there. And then I spent like 2 months trying to figure all that out. And then I decided, well, the more I looked into it, you can go to companies to do like white label, where you go to them and tell them, would you make me this up and label it all? But I didn't want to do that. They seemed really fake to me. I was like, if I'm making my own product, I want to put my blood and soul into this. I need to kind of make sure I'm doing it right. But the problem is I didn't understand how to ask money from a bank.
Yeah.
How to put a plan together of how to do this, what the rules are for packaging, all the things that I know now. So I just decided that I'm not going to risk too much. I've got the knowledge of how to build things. It's as simple as gearing system and a heat exchange, and that's kind of it really, with effectively just a simple flue system. That's really what a roaster is. I'll make one. Bugger it. Why not? And in essence, it's just a heat system that was a hard thing to get right, because you need a relay on the gas side of things. So I wanted to have a look around, see if I could find something that was a roasting gas relay. I was like, hold on, these look really similar to a barbecue. Like really similar to a barbecue. I wonder if I could use a barbecue. So I was like, bugger it, I'll do that. So I bought a barbecue off eBay, 50 quid, completely ripped all the components out, and then re-welded the whole frame, put a gearing system on it, bearings, and turned it into a commercial coffee roaster. And that took 2 months to turn it into a roaster, like properly, make it was functional. Had a few teething issues, wasted a bit of coffee, but it would roast 5 kilos in about 20 minutes.
So to roast coffee, you need a roaster. What would the price of a roaster be if you didn't build your own, because you didn't know how to go to the bank and perhaps get an investment, or formulate some sort of budget? What would you be looking at? Would starting a coffee roastery be impossible without upfront finance, basically? What cost are you looking at?
Yeah, so the cost of coffees, obviously you've got to consider that. Bags, when you buy them, can vary from 680 is the cheapest sack you could probably buy now, or even back then, to be fair, and then the most expensive about $5,000 for one single sack. And then the roaster's the biggest, like the roasting equipment's your biggest expense. So a 10 kilo roaster now, or back then should I say, would have set me back about $15,000 second hand and 30 to 40 grand brand new.
I'm just trying to lay it out. So you've got the taste for it, pardon the pun. You saw the gap in the market, I suppose.
Very much so, yeah.
And your first hurdle was, I suppose, the machinery and therefore the cost. So you went out and built one.
I'm very fortunate that I know how to build things, because it saved me an absolute bloody fortune over years. It's
amazing how you've wangled, and that's probably an injustice.
My best mate calls it ratchet.
Yeah. That's bonkers.
Yeah,
absolute bonkers.
But if simple engineering at its core is designed to make something easy. You can complicate things very, very easily. It's very easy to complicate anything in life, but engineering, when it's simple, it just does the job that you want it to do. So coffee, really, I mean, I can go on 10 hours about how coffee's complex and everything, but in essence, coffee is where you get a raw seed, we call it a bean, but it's a seed from a tree, and I apply heat to it over a certain amount of time, under a certain amount of temperature, to hit an end goal. And I am just roasting it like I would a joint, a steak, that kind of thing. And the same reaction that you get in meat when you cook it is a Maillard reaction. It's exactly what happens in coffee.
Maillard meaning?
It's just the browning of meat, but
right.
But it's the same concept in coffee. So you're taking a raw green seed and browning it to a certain degree, and you're changing the complex oils and flavors and carbohydrates in that seed to result into a flavor profile that you're looking for. But all you're doing is, you can do that with an airdryer.
Right.
You can do that with a popcorn popper. And that's what I used to do.
Yeah.
I've played around with a popcorn popper. If anyone at home wants to have a crack at roasting their own coffee, buy some green coffee, put it in a popcorn popper that you get from Argos for 20 quid. You've just got a little mini coffee roaster.
Wow.
It's not consistent. It gives you problems. But in theory, you're roasting coffee. Yeah. And that's literally what it was. That was the application. So I was like, well, if I can build the concept and make it work, it doesn't look pretty, but it's functional. That was my main concern. It will produce coffee that I'm happy with. A few tweaks here and there. I changed the gas system in a few ways, but this works. I'm happy with this. And very, very early on, I realised that I'd saved a lot of upfront money, that obviously I didn't have. And I could get access to good coffee from these roasteries that I was already using for my own personal uses. But I just asked for a bigger amount, and they were like, well, yeah, we can do you in these 10 kilo bags if you want, or a big bag, not the big massive sacks that they come in.
Was your objective at this point to make the coffee and wholesale it to coffee shops?
The reason why I picked that road was because I could never find this kind of calibre of coffee in Sheffield, period. There was no one really offering like an emporium style quality of coffee to a business at all. A lot of the coffee that was available that was good, where shops that were established before I decided to do this were having to go much further afield out of the area to find it. Definitely a company's doing great things. They're the people that I were buying it from. But there were no one on our doorstep. I've always been a bit of a local yokel. I like getting food and drink from a local area. I think you should support local businesses. I think that's the way that the economy should work, if you can. And so for me, if the coffee shops that I went to and spoke to, or people that I could go and buy nice food and drink from, they were saying, yeah, we get our coffee from London. And that just didn't sit right with me. So my approach was, well, if I can make you something that's better or just as good, and the price is pretty much the same, but I can give it you from my own back door, would you be interested in taking it? And predominantly the answer was yes. So the people that I went and approached, and the first client I landed was in Meadowhall of all places, in the lanes where, not far from where your shop is. And it was on the corner, on the lanes, and he was doing flavoured coffees. You know, like you get hazelnut flavoured coffees and stuff. He was doing that, and he wanted to potentially get some of this higher calibre coffee in. And my first delivery was 2 kilos of Papua New Guinea, single origin, double A grade, so it's like the tippy top you can get from that country. And dropped it off. It took me 2 hours, I think, to kind of produce, and I put it in a pathetic plastic bag. It was not presented very well at all. Dropped it off, and I got a call 2 hours later saying I've sold it all.
Wow.
I was like, okay, maybe I'm on something here.
So that's your first win.
That was my first win, first sale, and I was like, okay, maybe this idea of me roasting coffee for businesses actually might work. I've just got to figure out how to make this a bit more professional.
Do you know, when I think about my first sales, even at that point, I never thought that it could reach the heights that it has done. In that moment, were you just so driven by the fact, like, this might work, I'll get him another bag? Or are you more strategic than that? Did you sit back and go, right, how do I turn this into a full-time?
I'm not a strategic kind of guy. Not back then anyway. So I was very much, it was a hand-to-mouth operation. I want to do good things and I see if I can sell it. That's like week 1. Then week 2, I'll make some more, go and knock on someone else's door and do it like that. I would say as a business operation, I didn't really get to a goal-setting environment till my 3rd year into it, because at that time I was still trying to figure out how do I operate as a business, what do I need to do, what are the rules around this industry, and still figuring it out. I never went to business school. I never went to any sort of formal education to understand how to manage money and finances and all that kind of thing, all the things that I've learned over time. So until I got a couple of years in and I got away from using this barbecue that I'd made, and I could actually start making a bit more of a serious go of it, I didn't really have a strategic plan of where things were going to go. It was more, let's do good things, try and put good coffee into my local area and see what happens.
Yeah, so your focus is the product, and the business followed the product.
Very much so.
And again, I can relate to that. And I'm not a strategic thinker. And me and yourself, actually, we were on a business panel, weren't we, not too long ago.
That's right, yeah.
And discussions, even beforehand, were about talk about your exit strategy. And straight away, I'm like, I don't have one. I still to this day, I'm just trying to work on the product and exist in the industry. I just want to do what I'm doing forever. I don't see it any further than that. And that might be the wrong thing to do. But when we went and the discussions were, you have these business students and they're all asking the right questions on paper. But when I looked right to left on the panel with yourself and the two other guys, no one studied business. No one started with a business plan. and there's something in that it's like passion and product like sort of overrides strategy.
I've never met anyone in most sectors, I would say, outside of tech, I've met people that don't run businesses like that. I'd say the vast majority of people I know, it comes from doing good things and seeing if I can make my own version of that and be the captain of my own ship. The money and the strategy and exit is never really part of the conversation, and dealing with it in a traditional business MBA style way of doing it, I wouldn't say never, but I would say that's a rare experience for me when I speak to directors that are of a calibre and size similar to myself. Yeah. It's not part of the conversation. It's just that more, I want to do good things and I enjoy this. I think I can make an impact. I can be part of something in my community, in my area, and be part of something. The money and making sure I've got a wage and all the other things, it's kind of secondary a lot of the time. In my experience anyway. But I think for me, it came from very humble beginnings. It was not with an intention that I want to make this coffee brand that I'm going to try and build it into something. If I look back at where things began and where I am today, I don't even recognise the person that I started out as. Like, that's how far things have come. And I never sat after dropping that first delivery off thinking one day I'm going to get to this. Absolute bollocks. No is the answer.
Yeah,
no.
I think it's well interesting that, because like you say, in your experience, everyone you sort of get to know in business agrees with that concept, but yet they teach business in a certain way that business owners like myself and yourself can't really relate to. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a different style though, in my view. I think it comes down to that if you go into business school and you're learning to do a full MBA and you've gone out with honours, you're not going to be running a passion project business like we are.
Yeah,
you're going to be running a tech company.
Yeah,
or something of a larger scale, because that requires that.
Yeah.
But I think if it comes from the soul, for want of a better word, I think you need a different type of director. Yeah.
Your situation and your hobby led you to running your own business.
Very much so, yeah.
So you were never, like you say, set out, you never woke up one day saying, I want to run my own business. That's what I want to do. Where do I find it?
Yeah.
And I'm like that. I just followed my nose. But then, and that's what I tell people, but then when I look back, like when I was, 9 or 10, I had a stall outside my parents' house selling my version of Pokemon cards to all the other kids on the street. And no one told me to do that, and I don't get why. And then I've had businesses or started businesses in coaching weight loss, because all my expertise is actually in sports and nutrition.
Yeah.
Fitness apparel, and all these have failed ultimately. I had fun doing it. But even then, because sport and fitness is my passion as well, I was just doing it, and I never ever had the intention of running a business. But yet when I reflect, it were always sort of going to happen because I was relentless.
Yeah.
And it just drives back to passion, because I've only ever tried to do anything in the two things that I love.
Well, I think it's inherent nature of as well for our style of like running businesses. I've only met directors or owners that are like that, where it comes from that inherent need of that I've got the drive and passion, and I'll keep just going. And if I apply myself to something, it's only because I enjoy it. So paperwork's my weakness, because I bloody hate it.
Yeah.
And in school, I'm brilliant at science, but maths and English, not so much. So I didn't do very well. And I've always found if I'm interested in the topic and the project, I can't force myself to get engaged with it. I either am or I'm not. I think part might, that I would say that from my experience, anything like with like the coffee side of things, or anything projects that we've taken on, or roads that I've decided to take, I've only done it because one, it makes sense for the company ultimately, but two, it's something that I personally can back and make sure that as leadership, I'm offering it as a genuine move. I'm not doing it for strategic monetary value or anything like that. If we're doing this, it makes sense for a reason, and it's because I want to back it and see, because it's part of the brand and business I want to make. And that ultimately is the way that I've always done things. Yeah. Like you've seen, we've done markets together, like doing Nether Edge Market and Sharrow Market and stuff like that. I only do them because I love it.
Yeah.
And it's really good fun. And you might make a bit of money on the events. A lot of the time, you're giving up your weekend. You can see it on another angle. You're giving up your weekends, doing other things. But I genuinely love like standing on a market, speaking to people like yourself and meeting other businesses, and then just dealing with direct consumer as well.
There's a lot to be said for that. Yeah, and
it's lovely.
Yeah, and for me, that buzz when you make your first sale, because now I've talked about this previous, but making a sale now for me is a single sale or the same sale is nowhere near as exciting as the very first one, because the first one was, wow, I want to do more, I want to do this again. Whereas now it's like, well, this sale needs to cover wages, rent, etc.
Exactly, yeah.
So you sort of celebrated, or I did anyway, celebrated the first win, and now wins now come in the shape of, well, I need that to happen, otherwise I need to regress, and it's quite interesting. But let's go back to you then. So you sold these 2 bags now.
Yeah.
What happened next?
So got a few more smaller clients on. At this point, it was still new, so I was getting neighbours, because I lived in a flat complex at the time. Neighbours in the flat complex were knocking on saying, "What's that smell? Can I have some?"
Oh wow.
Neighbours on the road were asking for it. Family and friends were asking for it, and at this time, I'm still doing this in freezer bags. Like, this is not
little kitchen bags.
Oh yeah. Don't think this is professional at all. And the bags that I then upgraded to, which were proper coffee bags, I was sealing with a hair straightener, not a proper legitimate sill that we've got now. So it was ratchet.
Yeah.
But I realised, that the sales started to increase. Things started looking like they were going really well. I'd begged and borrowed and promised my wife that I'd kind of take on this small, tiny unit, so we weren't doing it in the house anymore. And I got a little tiny unit in Attercliffe. It was on Effingham Road, and it was like an upstairs old Victorian payroll business room, I think.
Right.
And I just converted that little tiny box room, smaller than the studio, it was tiny.
Yeah.
And I just put everything in there, put the extractor out the window, and I thought, let's see how we get on. And I spent a year there just figuring it out. And that was going to coffee shops, speaking to local going to local coffee shops, speaking to anyone that I thought would be interested in getting a local produced coffee bag.
Was this your sole income at the time then?
Yeah, there was nothing else.
So was there an element of making a leap, or were you safe at that point?
So up until this point, I went. I was working for a coffee shop initially. Was in Barnsley, and then Barnsley's shop. I decided to look at potentially getting something a bit closer. So I actually went to work for Tampa, which they were probably the only game in town that were doing decent things when I even got into all this. And they're still here today. And I ran their like enterprise front of house and everything for 6 months before I had decided to commit to all this. And the owner said, "Look, you're clearly onto something. You've lost your job. Go and follow your thing." I was
That's
like,
nice.
"Yeah, really good lad." And so then I did. And his name's Ben, really good guy.
Shout out to Ben.
Ben's a good lad. He's a good lad. So I did, and I did the very first Peddlers Market. It was literally him and a few others that decided to kind of do that event, and he asked me to come and do Peddlers Market. So I did my first event where I did retail bags and do it on a stall and little wallpaper paping table. It wasn't even a proper...
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was not...
Not even an event table.
No. And sold out in the first couple of hours. So I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I need 20 bags. And like, I got rid of that in the first couple of hours. So yeah, that's where the train started to set off, for want of a better word, and the volume started to pick up, and I was like, okay, I need to do this for that, I need to kind of look at this. And so for the first year, that's how I did it, and that's how I operated. And then it wasn't until I realised that I'm kind of running the business hand to mouth here a little bit, and I'm not really doing it in the best way that I could. I was still sole trader at this point. I need to really look at potentially getting equipment that and for context as well, every batch of coffee that I was roasting, the initial build I made was motorised,
right?
But the motor popped, didn't have enough capital or money in the bank to go and buy another one. So I made a hand crank, and I used to stand there and crank it by hand every single batch. And I did that for nearly 6 months. And I just thought, either this is going to go on its arse, or I really need to start thinking about making this serious. So I contacted a couple of companies that I knew that sold old catering equipment and other things, and I found a coffee roaster that had come from Russia. The drum was pretty much, the drum and an extractor bit was all they got left, and they got that for a couple £100. So I thought, well, a new motor's going to cost me $250, and a parts and bits of a commercial roaster's about the same price. I thought, well, I'll buy that, and I'll turn that into the next coffee roaster.
Yeah.
So I spent 6 months building that roaster, and that
typically.
Yeah, exactly. Made all the framework, did all the gas relay system, turned it into like what you get in a turbo, like in a car. So you get a heat recovery system in it, and made it into a blueprintable coffee roaster, something you could buy. And I got blueprints online from another company that make them, and made it into a legitimate coffee roaster that you could go and spend 30 grand on. And I made it all out of Sheffield steel plate from the area. And I thought, this is going to be the crowning jewel. Like, I'm going to make this properly. This is going to be functional, and this will last me a couple of years, and like it'll work, and I can press go, and I can stand away from it while I'm doing other things, all that kind of stuff. And that's the coffee roaster that I still use today.
No way.
So the one that I built all those years ago,
way.
every cup of any coffee that anyone's ever drunk of what we've ever made for the last 9 years has been made on that. And that's literally what we're still using today.
That's astonishing. Not many people can say that.
No. And it is very rare.
Are you proud of that?
I used to be
It's a great story, right?
I used to be very embarrassed, actually. To be honest with you, I used to be really embarrassed because I was like, well, I don't have the money, I don't have the investment, I don't have the knowledge of a business plan. I see a lot of other businesses I look at and go, look how nice and shiny their equipment is, and they've got all these beautiful things, and I just can't afford that. Like, I'm just trying to string it together.
Imposter syndrome at that time.
To a degree, yeah. I just felt like I was just, I've got
winging it.
I've got the passion, but I am winging it. I look back at it now, and I think I am very proud of myself. Like, I'm like, there's not many people I know that have, I don't actually know, heard of many people that have gone out and built a commercial roastery and like built that from scratch.
No, that's unique, mate.
Just a tad. And at the time, I didn't know that. At the time, I was like, well, it's not that hard to do kind of attitude. And I'm not, I guess I didn't really, and I never told anyone. I'd never told anyone that I'd made that. I just I just let them presume that that's what I bought it.
I understand that.
And so it took me a couple of years to kind of have the confidence to say, no, I made it. And I realised how unique that was to people. And we got picked up from the Star for it, and they realised that, like, wow, this is really cool. You've made it out of steel.
It's a story in itself.
Oh god! And I never used to see it like that. And it's a proper marketable piece of marketing and all the rest of it. I'm not a marketer, so I don't see it like that.
Yeah.
I made it because I couldn't afford a proper one.
Yeah.
Was always my view. So I know that. Then the journey began, and then because things started to then really start to progress in my view, like I was like, okay, this is really starting to get some traction now. Clients are really starting to build up. We're getting a reputation within like hospitality, not retail customers, but like within coffee shops and Sheffield businesses. We're starting to get a bit more known. If I drop a card off, they've heard of the business before, which is lovely. That's what we wanted to do.
It snowballs, doesn't it?
It does. Oh, of course it does. Yeah. And that's when we decided to move to Neepsend. So I'd kind of jumped around a little bit. So we'd gone from Effingham, couldn't have this new roaster there because it was too big. It weighed nearly 2 tons in total. So that got moved to Carbrook, stayed there for a year, moved then to Neepsend and stayed there for 5 years. That's when really things started to get a lot of traction, and we started to get a lot of wholesale. And at this point, we weren't doing any of the things we do today. So no online presence, no retail presence. It was exclusively B2B. No business to business. That was it. Nothing else.
Staff?
2. I've got 2 staff.
So that's the first big leap.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Commitment.
Because when we moved to Neepsend, it was literally a case of that I can no longer do this on my own. I mean, there were a lot of things I was doing previously that were like labour intensive and everything else, just to kind of make our own brand. Like the old school bags, we used to print them, every single one. We used to stand there and print them by hand, like literally every single one. I can't do that anymore. Yeah. Get labels now, like everybody else does.
Yeah. You follow your nose, though, don't you?
Of course you do, yeah. And
but is that? Would you say that's the first like commitment where what I was talking about earlier, where the sales now required because you've got overheads, you've got rent, you've got staff, you've got these responsibilities all of a sudden.
Premises was my biggest, because I'd never experienced business before. It was all very new to me. Like, so I would say the first, what I felt to me like a commitment was actually begging my wife to let me pay 150 quid a month for a small room.
Yeah.
Which seems such a silly thing looking back at it.
Yeah.
But it really was a big jump, because I was like, I'm having to commit to something financially when finances aren't great to make this work, or at least try something. And committing to a contract that says you're here for 3 months as a rolling contract. You can get, after 30 days, you can give your contract key. I look back at that now. I've just signed a contract for 10 years.
Yeah.
So a different league entirely. So that was actually, if I look back at a memory, that's the memory that I think of. That's the moment that I remember feeling very like I'm having to really commit to something here. But yeah, when you get to staffing and everything, it's not just your life, and then it's somebody else's and their wages and everything else, and that's when it really just becomes serious. Yeah. I agree.
So take us right up to what you've got going off now, because I know you've just opened a new facility.
Yeah. So from there, we, before we move a bit further, I've always, from the very beginning, even when we moved to, when I was at Effingham Road in Atcliffe, and at Carbrook, and at Neepsend, the goal of the company and why I wanted to do it was to supply coffee to local businesses in Sheffield. I did not want to compromise on quality, and I did not want to have let's make the cheapest product I can. I always wanted to make sure that the coffee that was sourcing was directly traded. So I knew where it had come from, down to GPS coordinates of the family and people that had grown it. I don't have the resource to go out there and speak to them or buy the contract, but I can definitely pick up the phone to suppliers that would be willing to give me that information, or at least have that information or the coffee available. And as time progressed, I got more and more of those types of coffees available. And I only kept those offers on the menu. I never got anything in that wasn't that. And that was the company statement, for want of a better word. And as time's grown on, that's been a much bigger part of it. So that was the beginning side of it. And then as time's gone on, I've tried to make growth come from other sectors. We can take on more work from other areas, like the online side of things, which is taken off like crazy. And then
you're selling to the end user.
Very much so. And I only really got a flavour for that because we at the Neepsend site, because we're not too far from town, we were getting a lot of people just walking straight into the premises, which were not advertised as a shop or anything like that.
So you're in theory you were a factory, for a better want of a word, but the footfall were people walking past and asking for a coffee.
Yeah, and a bag, which was mental to me, because I'm like, well, we're not even on Google. Why?
Yeah, that's amazing.
How do you even know where we are?
I suppose they smelt it, right? Yeah. And then that natural progression was, well, okay, we're not even trying, and we're getting a response. So what happens if we try? And the first kind of approach of let's try a shop was I got an opportunity to open a coffee shop in Commune. So we've for years I've done markets with you and others, and I've always done the Christmas markets as well outside Fargate. Love doing them, and I got approached by the organiser of the Commune to say we're looking for a coffee operator in our shop. Would you be interested? And I said, you know what, yeah, I'll give it a go. So we fitted the shop out, got everything refit, and then I had to go at our first retail site, and it went really well. We had problems. There were always going to be problems. And ultimately, sadly, we just had the site. It's known for not known for good things, but they just had management issues and other things. So we decided to walk away from it. But it did give me an insight into the fact that if I can connect the farm to the end user and operate on a farm to cup operation, but be visible, that's really like the gold standard of what I can offer as a brand and a business. So that's why I moved to Arundel Street. So after I got Tasting Commune, I realised quite quickly that why breweries do so well in Sheffield is that you can sit in the brew tanks and have a beer. Yeah.
And you can see exactly where you've had your beer brewed and you can drink it on site. And that model became really, really, I was like, I've heard of this.
It's a cool new concept.
It does exist in London, but it does not very commonly exist in the north.
Right.
There are people doing it, but it's rare, not very common. So I started looking for premise, and that's why I picked Arundel Street. One, it's central, which I think is really important. There's not a lot of centralised coffee roasteries a lot of the time, and Sheffield definitely didn't have any.
So just for the people that might be listening that aren't familiar with Arundel Street and Sheffield, it's a road or a place with a higher footfall.
Correct, and it's very close to university campus as well. So yeah, we're close to all the high traffic area. There's a lot of things going off in the area, and it's very central. But we've got this pre-war building, and was in a bad way. But again, me being me, don't mind getting on tools.
Yeah.
And spent a better part of 6 months to rip out the building. We had a tree growing in the back room, roof had collapsed in, but location was fantastic, big massive layout, and it had that ability to kind of go big glass wall with the roastery all behind and then seating up front, so you can smell and have a sensory experience of what coffee can offer when it's done really well, and you can touch and feel your production be right behind you, which is so rare. And I was like, well, yeah, I'm doing this. This is the standard of what I want to aim for, and and at this point I've got children as well, so I've got 2 young girls, and we watch Princess and the Frog. It's probably one of our favourite movies, and she's like trying to build this big restaurant, and I'm almost there kind of feeling. It was very much like that to me, and I was like, I'm almost there, that's what I'm aiming for, that's what I want to get to. And all this lead up to this point has been, I want to try do good things, get a reputation, get B2B sorted, get better coffee into Sheffield, and then that's why I committed to this bigger premises, to really make it into something that it's a hub for. If you're into coffee, you're into that, you can actually touch and feel it, you'd be immersed in the experience. And that was the long goal of the pipe dream of,
It's adding to the product though, isn't it? Because like you've just said, it's the experience as well.
Very much so. Very much so. And that's what it offers. And that was a goal. But yeah, spent 6 months.
So even until that period, your product overall was growing?
Very much so. Yeah, the range was getting bigger, the reach was getting bigger, not just online, but in commercial retailers, and then actual coffee shops that we supply. And so we varied in size in terms of output, but I'd say the peak that we've ever seen in terms of brand and business up until recently was pre-COVID, just before pre-COVID, and we were over 120 wholesale clients in Sheffield and South Yorkshire, and our reach was online, was national, and it was, we were doing good things, and the model of what I was trying to create was, and this was all in this little unit in Neeps End on the same roaster that I built all this time ago, and that really was where things started to pick up. Obviously, like everyone, we had that dip during that time, and then that's when I've decided to change the model and go for the Arundel Street, so we can be a bit more retail focused, offer our own coffee shop option as well as the wholesale, as well as the online, and then it allows people to engage with us as a retailer. And I realised quite quickly with opening that we aren't very well known to the retailer as much as we are with the wholesalers, or as much as owners know who we are. The retailers didn't really know a great deal about. There's a few, but not as many as you would think. And that's what I've been trying to build since we moved there in 2022, 23. So that was the long goal. But during all of this time, I've made sure that the quality's been right. I've made sure that the standards of what I set out were all followed as best as I possibly could. And as things have grown and got busier, my goal was to make sure that I could connect the end user to the farm. And I do that my goal was I wanted to do that by going to the actual origin. So actually going to where the coffee is grown, the people that actually do the hard graft, and connecting them in a way where visually show people where your coffee comes from. These are the people that do the hard work, and these are the contracts that we've held for now 10 years. This is where your money's going.
And for me, this is where our business just gets even more interesting, because you are visiting these places now. Where have you been? So
I've been to Uganda, Congo, and Brazil. Yeah.
Tell me what it's like.
I love it. It's a bit dangerous, obviously. It's a bit dangerous.
You're a big lad though, aren't you?
I'm a chunky monkey. I'm all right.
But in seriousness then, so what have you got any stories for us on
so when you go to these places, my experiences are that it's just like the UK, for want of a better word. The cities are really dangerous. The sticks aren't. You're not going to get stabbed in Nether Edge, but you might get stabbed in London or right in Sheffield town centre. So you just got to be careful and make sure you keep your wits about you when you're like in the bigger city centres, because you just a lot of the time you're a foreigner, so you
stand out
very much so. And I'm not a small guy either, so that don't help. And then the sticks, especially like when I was in Uganda, I was in the middle of nowhere. A lot of the times where the areas that I'm in don't have a lot of electricity or running water. It's a really rural communities, and I've never felt more safe. Really felt very welcome, very, very lovely people. Everybody wants to come up and talk to you and say hello, where you're from. Felt nothing but being welcomed. You go a bit closer to the cities, you get a bit more aggro and other things. But when I was in Uganda, I went up so there's the Rift Valley of Africa that goes from Ethiopia all through Kenya and everything else. That bowl, for want of a better word, I went to the tippy top of the bowl to go meet a real tribal community in the coffee area, in the growing fields. So I was really in the sticks, and like on the verge with the Congo jungle as well. And it was just like being in home. Everyone was so welcoming. Looks completely different, like this wooden shack, like dung huts, and the rural Africa that you see on the telly kind of environment. But the mountain people were just so welcoming, so lovely.
And at this point, are you researching or negotiating, or is that all done and you're going out to visit to almost make it more credible that you're sourcing your beans from?
I always wanted to link. I was chasing, where do I get my coffee from? I want to know information about where it comes from, and a lot of the time it's hard to find that. So I'm trying to make it as transparent as I possibly can to say that coffee, unfortunately, like a lot of other industries, does not have a good reputation in terms of like labour and where the hard work comes from. That's why we have things like Rainforest Alliance, Fair Trade and UTZ in place to make sure that there's a standard in place for fair work and labour. The way that I operate is directly traded. So the directly traded to me means that I have a conversation with the cooperative. The best way to explain this is like if I, let's say, the Wednesday football ground, we'll say that's the central place where all the processing is done, all the buying is done from the farmers, and then the farmers are dotted all around Sheffield, and they bring all that coffee to the football stadium.
Yeah.
That's the cooperative. I financially deal with the cooperative. I never deal with the individual.
Yeah.
In places like Africa, Uganda, Kenya, things like that. And same can be said for places like Colombia as well. But my trade is generically with them. However, I made a real due diligence making sure that the price that they're paying to the farmer is above market value.
Right.
That's really important to me. So that they're asking for a higher grade quality coffee, but on top of that, they're paying a premium for it, to what they would normally see in that area. So in coffee, you can kind of set the standard of what's paid and bought at the cooperative, and I go above and beyond that. It's part and parcel of what we do. And so when I go out, I'm documenting that.
Yeah.
I'm documenting what we do, what we say. I have a GoPro on my chest a lot of the time, show people what I'm talking to. And it's simple conversation sometimes. Some of it's quite boring, but a lot of it's really interesting. And not just the welcoming into the area, but that conversation of trade and how much we're going to take and what we're paying for it. Really transparent with all that. Because it is just a business transaction, but it connects people with their food and their drink. And that's really important to me.
I think it's important to the end users, meaning the people that buy from you as well.
Very much so. And yes, we do not sell cheap coffee. We can't sell cheap coffee because of the way that we buy and sell it. But it's done in a way that I think is sustainable. It means that the end user can make that product year on year. The land doesn't have to be sacrificed in any sort of way to make it ends meet. The individuals, especially as an example that I got in Uganda, they don't have the same systems that we have in the UK. They have to pay for schooling themselves. It's 30,000 Ugandan shillings to pay for a school term. The average annual salary is around about 120,000 Ugandan shillings. So, but the coffee that they need to sell produces only about a 10% of that value. So they have to sell a lot of other things to make it worth their while. And they get paid what they used to get paid at the cooperative was 600 shillings. We pay them 1,200 shillings. So they get paid twice as much for the same coffee. But the quality is amazing. They're so blessed in the fact that they've got the land, all the microbiome in the soil, the morphology, the way that the plant performs and what it does, and just Africa in general is just so long established in coffee production that they've just got all the things that play to their favour, and they're just bloody good grafters.
Yeah.
They know how to work, and they're passionate about it. So they should get paid properly.
Exactly.
And that's my personal view. We do that in the UK, so we should do that for people that we work with. And I can't jump on a plane and put it in my luggage bag, but I can have a trade agreement with someone around how we operate and do that in what's in a fair manner. I don't need a stamp to go on it to tell them what I've done. We could just have that and be transparent about it. So that's why I do the trips. That's why I show people where it comes from and connect people with the product and show as a farm to cup operation how we offer.
So it's really refreshing to hear you talk about that, and the passion's obvious in there. And I think from experience, especially living in Sheffield, there's something about Sheffield that the people of Sheffield are proud of the businesses.
Yeah.
The smallest things. We're really... Yorkshire folk in general are known for being proud. And I think showcasing what you do, and I mean everyone... Businesses now most businesses are becoming incredibly good at showcasing what they do via social media.
Yeah.
And offering that transparency, I think, only adds value. And if you don't have the true passion and therefore the things in place to make the product the best that it can be, then that's when your business might fall. So I think all these things that you've talked about are attributes to the success that you've had. Let's talk now about where you're at now in terms of your latest venture.
Yeah.
Tell me, so we've got to Arundel Gate.
Yeah.
What's happened next?
So Arundel Street's had nothing but success. I'm really happy with the performance of it. The engagement in the local area has been fantastic. And because of how well it's gone, I wanted to look at extending that, and I looked at another couple of premises to have another couple of shops. What frustrates me is that you see a lot of chains have grown since COVID. A lot of franchises have opened up, and I'm seeing a lot more of Starbucks and Costas, and they're dominating the high street because they're being priced out with all the other fun things that are going off. But they're a lot more Americanizing drive-through, and it makes it very clear to me that that's because the demand is there, black and white. And why don't independents do drive-throughs? That was a genuine question. It's like, why? Why don't they do it? I don't know anyone that's ever done it. I couldn't think of anyone that I can think of in Sheffield that's ever done a drive-through in food, drink, or any sector. And I looked, as no one's done it, and it just seems that you can, but just nobody has. So like, fuck it, we'll do it.
Yeah. Amazing.
So
you opened just last week, were it?
Yeah, last week. So we've opened the very first drive-through in South Yorkshire, and the success has been brilliant out the gate. With it, what's amazing, as you talk about Sheffield, obviously it's got its little microclimates in different villages and parts of Sheffield. Never felt so welcomed. Like the amount of people that have walked in and just been like, welcome to the area. So lovely to have this in the area. It's brilliant. And I picked a location that's an ex-bank, Royal Bank of Scotland. So it's still got the vault in there and everything, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But we've done the layout where it's really open plan, high-speed internet, relaxed environment, and it's exactly the same ethos of what I set up with Arundel Street, but it's done in a not, we're not penalising you with like you've got to do a certain amount of spend or anything like that, but offering the same kind of quality menu that we've put together at Arundel Street, all the things that we've figured out there, and offer it where we can have a proper legitimate drive-through as well as an inside seating, so we can house 50 people. And the response has been brilliant, and it's by sticking to that model of let's just do good things. Let's offer it where we can put something in a black hole of an area of Sheffield that doesn't really have a lot of these kind of things around, where you can hopefully build something that offers another shop to the community, but it's done with a Sheffield branded business, and that's why I picked the area.
It's amazing. The story is just so fascinating. The growth, it's been rather fast, the growth. Let's talk just a bit more about you before we close off. Work-life balance, I always like to ask this, because running your own business, from my experience, you have to compromise, and it's not always great. You work an awful lot. What's your work-life balance like?
It varies, unfortunately. So I've got 2 young children, and I definitely have to give up time to make this work. It's not the best. It could be better. I get conflicted. In the early days, it was just me and my wife, so I was a bit built up, But it's not. It's the hardest part of running your own company. Unfortunately, it's when you're passionate about it. It's not a job. It's a lifestyle for me. I genuinely do enjoy being part of what I'm doing. But then I've got family and other commitments that we all want to be involved in. So trying to balance that is always the hardest part. And I don't get it right. I'm still struggling with it. Yeah. It's hard. It's really hard.
It is. It's hard knowing. It's hard to break up. Do you do it in time? Do you do it in effort? It's really difficult.
Very much.
I struggle with it. But nothing changes, and I don't know where I stand with it, but I think understanding it's the first thing.
It is, and what I tend to do is if I know that I've had a couple of weeks where I have not been around a great deal, I've missed a couple of bedtimes, or I've missed this on the weekends with family or whatnot, the week after I make up for it, and that's the best I can do at the minute.
Yeah,
that's the best I can do. Yeah.
Finally, then, as we close, advice to others starting a business. We've talked a lot about business. It's been a very interesting conversation. What's the one thing that you would advise someone who's perhaps got the idea, got the passion, got the product? How do they explore this venture?
I think if you're already in a situation where you've got something already, you've kind of nailed it on the head. In terms of, I've got my product, I know what I'm doing, I've got the passion, I've got all those things. That's really quite a big step in itself, I think. As time's gone and I've realised how valuable that is, it's just sticking with it. Unfortunately, you've got to swallow the pill that you're probably going to have to wait 3 or 4 years before you can pay yourself anything close to a wage, no matter what outgoings you've saved here or there. I've saved a lot of money over the years on doing things myself, but I still didn't pay myself for at least the first 4 or so years. And a bit of a shout out, Autumn Mushrooms, who do Nether Edge and Sharrow, lovely people. And she said the same thing to me. She's like, keep going, because 4 years or so, you'll actually have a business model that'll pay you a wage. And she weren't wrong. So that's probably the only...
Perseverance.
It is, unfortunately. Yeah, you have to...
And that's difficult, though, because everyone needs income to live.
Yeah.
So it then has to become... Maybe we're advising that you start as a side hustle.
Side hustle, or if you can get... I think if I had my time again, I would definitely have gone to the bank, learn how to ask for capital, and learn how to generate funds so I could generate a model that would work on. I need to pay myself a wage of this much for the next 4 years or 5 years, whatever your loan agreement's going to be, plus the investment I need to get on my products and equipment or whatever that needs to be. And that's what I need to borrow.
And that just gets you there quicker.
It does, yeah. And that's what I've done this time round. So anytime I'm going to open a new venture, which I plan on doing many more, that's how I'll do it, because that's the best way to do it. But you've got to learn the hard way, unfortunately, with that. And that's how I learned the hard way of doing it with graft and effort and giving up my time. But there are ways of getting funding that can allow you to get there, but the pressure of I need to pay my bills goes away because you've just got to get the model right. And that's it. It's harder because you've got to have all these other fun things behind the background working for it. But that would be the way that I would advise doing it. And don't be scared of asking for more money. Yeah, it's terrifying, but it is the better way of doing it.
Frazer, we could go on and on and on.
Yeah, we could, mate. Yeah, we could.
But time is up. So thank you very much for coming on.
My pleasure.